Call Putin Ishmael and send him off to the sea. Ukraine has a lovely present waiting for him and his soldiers, and it's inspired by the great white whale that led Captain Ahab to his doom. Only this time it'll be Putin watching as the sailors on his ships are destroyed. Those sailors aren't ready for what Ukraine is about to unleash. MOBIDIK is here. And Ukraine's white whale is so powerful that it can turn any Russian ship into a submarine. We got our first glimpse at the latest slice of brilliance to come out of Ukraine's innovative defense sector at the Ukrainian Nordic DIH Naval Forge 2026 conference, which was held in Kyiv on June 8th to 9th. That conference is a showcase for naval weapons developed by Ukraine and its Nordic partners, and it was the MOBIDIK that stole the show. Developed by a company named Warhead, the new weapon is interesting in that it packages capabilities previously showcased by other Ukrainian naval weapons into one commercial platform that can be easily used by multiple branches of Ukraine's military and, perhaps, as importantly, sold off to allies to further Ukraine's cause of being one of the key defensive players in Europe. And best of all, MOBIDIK isn't just a concept, it's ready to go. Militani reports that every single configuration of the MOBIDIK has already been developed, and that they are all in operational use as we speak. So this isn't some interesting idea that a Ukrainian company has come up with. Ukraine's white whale is already swimming, and it may well be wreaking havoc on Russian naval assets right now. So we know that MOBIDIK is here, but what do we actually know about the weapon package itself? The basics are impressive enough in their own right. MOBIDIK is a naval drone that reportedly has a range of about 1,400 kilometers. That's more than enough to cover the Black Sea, and it also places the Sea of Azov within range. The platform is capable of being armed with weapons, and it operates autonomously. Euromaidan Press says that MOBIDIK can sail for 120 hours without human intervention. This isn't just a white whale, it's a beast that can hunt on its own, and it's getting ready to make the Black Sea its hunting ground. Beyond that, the new naval drone can travel at speeds of up to 65 km per hour, which is more than fast enough to catch up to most Russian warships, along with many of the faster boats that Russia could deploy. It's also seaworthy up to 1.2 meters in wave height. Again, that's ideal for the Black Sea. A 2014 study of that sea found that its average wave height doesn't exceed 0.7 meters, and the MOBIDIK clears that with room to spare. Now, all of this is impressive enough in its own right. What Ukraine has here is clearly a very competent maritime drone that is fast, has a great range, and seems to have been purpose-built to operate in a stretch of water that is key to the Ukraine war. But there's so much more that makes the MOBIDIK special. We mentioned loading a missile into the drone. That mention was more important than it appears on the surface. What makes the MOBIDIK more special than any other maritime drone package that has come before it is that there are 6 versions of the white whale, each of which has a different purpose. These 6 versions are divided into 3 categories that allow Ukraine to cover bases related to strikes, assaults, and even air defenses. We'll start with the latter. The MOBIDIK's air defense configurations are called MD1 and MD2. In both cases, the MOBIDIK carries interceptor drones, though the type of drone differs. MD1 can carry up to 5 fixed-wing interceptors, which can be launched from the platform to take out Russian Shahed types and similar strike drones as they head toward Ukraine over the Black Sea. Russia has long used Crimea as a launching point for its strike drones, which had previously been fired from sites inland, but as of September 2025 are being launched from the western coast of Crimea. An MD1 with interceptor drones can stop Russia's Shahed types in their tracks long before they reach the Ukrainian mainland. As for the MD2, it also carries interceptors, only they're quadcopter variants, and this version of the MOBIDIK can carry 8 of them. Again, Russia's Shaheds had better watch out, not that they will be able to do much about a maritime drone lurking below them, ready to fire interceptors into their paths. So we see how useful the MOBIDIK can be from a defensive perspective. We also told you that Ukraine can use its new drone to turn Russian warships into submarines. That's where the MD3 and MD4 variants come into play. Both are designed to deliver explosive payloads that strike targets at the medium and strategic range, Euromaidan Press reports. And of the two, the MD3 is the most interesting. It can reportedly carry Warhead's own Morrigan drones, which are top-secret drones that have already been causing a major splash in Ukraine's campaign to isolate Crimea. On May 30th, United 24 Media was one of the first outlets to report on the Morrigan. It said that Ukraine's 412th Nemesis Brigade of the Unmanned Systems Forces had been using it to attack Russian military logistics, including supply and fuel trucks, across supply routes stretching from Mariupol to Crimea. We don't know a huge amount about this drone, outside of the fact that it's a fixed-wing strike drone that is clearly capable of traveling several hundred kilometers, given that it's played a role in turning the key R280 highway into a death trap for any Russian trucks attempting to cart fuel and supplies in or out of Crimea. Business Insider adds that the drone has swept wings, and it appears to launch using a rail or slingshot platform, which eliminates the need for a runway. That gives us a hint as to why the Morrigan is being used for the MD3. A maritime drone doesn't have a runway, so the perfect type of weapon to load into it is a mid-range strike drone that can be launched from dozens of kilometers away from a target and doesn't need a stretch of road to get airborne. Now, a drone that has proven itself to be effective against Russian vehicles is going to be unleashed against Crimea's coastal defenses, Russian ships attempting to sail in the Black Sea, and even reconnaissance assets, such as air defense systems and radars, that Russia has set up in the Black Sea region. Then there's the MD4. We don't have as much information about this variant of the MOBIDIK as we do for the MD3. All that Militani has reported is that the MD4 will carry some sort of jet-powered unmanned aerial vehicle that will be used to deal with high-priority targets at strategic range. There's no indication of what type of drone this will be. We know that Ukraine had drones with turbojets, including the UAV-290, which it unveiled at the Eurosatory 2026 event in Paris just a couple of weeks before the MOBIDIK came to light. We also know that this drone, which has a range of 650 kilometers and can carry a 100-kilogram warhead, is launched using a solid propellant booster, which means no runway is required. So it may be the UAV-290 is coming to a Black Sea near Russia. If it is, then Russia's ships will have to deal with a strike drone that may be even more powerful than the Morrigan and is capable of a top speed of 800 kilometers per hour. Still, we'll have to wait until we see the MD4 in the water before we can confirm precisely what type of drone Ukraine intends to use for this version of the MOBIDIK. And with that, we come to the final category and the last two variants of the MOBIDIK. The MD5 and the MD6 are the assault versions, and they're the ones that are loaded with more conventional weapons that will be devastating to Russia's warships and aerial assets. The MD5 is the real heavy hitter. It can carry a Browning M2 heavy machine gun module, which can be used to fire on both aerial and surface targets. It also comes loaded with missiles, either R-73s or AIM-9 missiles, both of which are anti-aircraft missiles. The R-73 is a Soviet-era weapon that is capable of intercepting targets flying at speeds of up to 2,500 km per hour at altitudes up to 20 kilometers. As for the AIM-9, that comes to Ukraine courtesy of the US and Ukraine's Western partners who use the missile. Supersonic, heat-seeking, and loaded with a powerful high-explosive warhead, the AIM-9 is one of the best anti-aircraft missiles that Ukraine has in its arsenal. Compatibility with this missile also opens the door for Ukraine to sell the MD5 to its partners, but we'll get to that. With the MD5, we see a version of the MOBIDIK that seems to be designed for dealing with any fighter jets or bombers that Russia is foolish enough to send over the Black Sea or push into the skies over Crimea. The latter is a particular issue for Ukraine. Russia's approach with its more valuable aerial assets is to keep them out of the occupied territories and instead have them launch missiles and glide bombs from behind enemy lines. It's an approach that works well. Russia launched 59 cruise missiles, 6 anti-ship missiles, and 39 ballistic missiles at Ukraine in June, United 24 media reports. At the very least, the cruise missiles would have been launched from fighter jets or bombers, some of which are stationed in Crimea. Russia is also launching up to 250 glide bombs per day at Ukraine, Euromaidan press reports, with its planes having to fly up to 200 sorties daily to deliver their devastating payloads. With the MD5, Ukraine now has a maritime drone that is capable of taking the airframes used to unleash these weapons out of the sky. Interception isn't the play here. Ukraine is looking to strike at the source, and the MD5 makes that possible. Anti-air missiles unleashed by a naval platform off the coast of Crimea could make the peninsula utterly worthless to Russia when it comes to launching missiles and glide bombs at Ukrainian territory. And last but not least, it's the MD6. This is the platform that is going to be most dangerous to Russia's warships. It can serve as a carrier for strike FPV drones, which can be unleashed against all sorts of targets, ranging from air defenses to small vessels. But the ace in the hole for this version of the MOBIDIK is the 300-kilogram warhead loaded into the drone. This warhead makes the MD6 Ukraine's Kamikaze whale, and it's powerful enough to punch holes into warships and utterly devastate port infrastructure. This is the version of the MOBIDIK that is perhaps most recognizable as being based on Ukraine's existing collection of maritime drones, which have already done so much damage to Russia's assets in the Black Sea. All of this awaits Russia. Each of the 6 versions of the MOBIDIK is operational and, according to the manufacturer, the program is moving into the codification phase that sets the stage for serial production. Once that happens, Russia is in trouble. But more than that, Ukraine will be taking yet another step closer to becoming one of the most important players in European defense. But before we get into that, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If this is the kind of insight that you want to see, then make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and you have notifications turned on. From everything we've just told you, the MOBIDIK is already looking like a game changer, and where it's clearly going to become very important is in the battle over the Black Sea. It would be easy to assume that Ukraine has won that battle already. When the war started, the Black Sea was supposed to be one of the most important assets that Russia has in its arsenal. Ukraine didn't have a navy to speak of, and Russia had the Black Sea Fleet, a collection of more than 70 warships and submarines that was supposed to allow Russia to blockade Ukraine's commercial ships and enable both attacks against the mainland and the consistent ferrying of troops and equipment into Ukraine. Things didn't go to Putin's plans. Using a combination of missiles and maritime drones, Ukraine has made mincemeat of much of the Black Sea Fleet. By early 2024, Ukraine had sunk or disabled about a third of the warships in the fleet, which has forced Russia to withdraw what remains from its bases and attempt to hide the ships out of range of Ukraine's missiles and maritime drones. In a June 26th report, Metsa said that Ukrainian officials claim that Russia no longer sends any surface vessels into the Black Sea or the Sea of Azov for fear of them being blown to pieces by Ukraine's weapons. As the spokesperson of the Ukrainian Navy, Dmytro Pletenchuk, sarcastically puts it, the occupier does not retain any units at sea, neither in the Azov Sea nor in the Black Sea. In fact, for the last few months, it's become some kind of luxury to venture out to sea. From that, it would seem that Ukraine controls the Black Sea. In many ways, it does. Where the MOBIDIK becomes a potential game changer now is twofold. First, having so many different variants means that Ukraine can turn the Black Sea into an asset for itself. We've already touched on a few ways it could do that when discussing the variants. These autonomous drones can go on patrol, looking out for Russian ships that do venture into the waterway that has already become lethal to them. Those ships will become submarines, allowing Ukraine to maintain the advantageous position that it has already created for itself. If Putin hoped that Russia would one day be able to make use of the Black Sea again, an entire fleet of MOBIDIKs put an end to those hopes. These are whales that can't be torpedoed easily, and being drones, they're a lot cheaper to produce than the warships that Russia would have to sacrifice to fight them. Second, the MOBIDIK can be a huge contributor to Ukraine's campaign to isolate Crimea. Russia would have been wondering what else Ukraine could unleash in that campaign. The logistics lockdown program has already enabled Ukraine to organize its mid-range strike drones to the point where they've created an unconventional blockade of the Crimean Peninsula. Roads, bridges, and trucks are all being targeted, preventing the flow of supplies and fuel into Crimea. The occupiers on the peninsula are now dealing with a massive fuel shortage, along with constant Ukrainian strikes, all of which are designed to make living in Crimea untenable. And now, the MOBIDIK is in play. The isolation campaign is only going to get stronger from here. The versions of the MOBIDIK that can target ships will almost inevitably have their sights on the ferries that Russia is using to shuttle supplies into Crimea now that the roads are being shut down. Those ships will become targets, and so will the Kerch Bridge. Ukraine doesn't even need to send the Kamikaze MD6 in to do the job. The versions of the new maritime drone that can unleash aerial drones or missiles could be enough to hit the Kerch Bridge at range, cutting off any overland route that Russian occupiers can use to reach the mainland. What Ukraine has on its hands here is a weapon that could make a non-traditional blockade a little more traditional. Imagine a fleet of MOBIDIKs surrounding Crimea and you get the picture. No ships could get in or out, military assets would be pounded daily, and if Russia tries to use Crimea to launch attacks against the Ukrainian mainland, there will even be interceptor drones and anti-air missiles waiting to stop those strikes in their tracks. Every problem that impacts Crimea right now will only be made worse when MOBIDIK enters mass production. And it seems likely that Ukraine will be able to make more than enough to complete its strategy of turning Crimea into an isolated island. We don't know how much the MOBIDIK costs. That information hasn't been disclosed. However, we do know that the Sea Baby, which bears plenty of similarities to the new drone, though minus the versatility, costs around $200,000 per unit, per Defense Express. If the MOBIDIK is around that price range, Ukraine could build dozens. Russia wouldn't be able to do a thing about it. The strategy to isolate Crimea would level up. Finally, think about where the MOBIDIK was introduced, the Ukrainian Nordic DIH Naval Forge 2026 conference. What this tells us is that Ukraine has an eye toward the future. Its new drone will serve the immediate purposes we've discussed in the Black Sea and Crimea, sure, but Ukraine wanted the eyes of partners on the MOBIDIK. That's why it was unveiled at a conference that involved the country's Nordic allies. In the MOBIDIK, Ukraine has another weapon that it can use to establish itself as one of the most important defense partners that its European allies have, meaning this drone plays a huge role in helping Ukraine complete its transformation from recipient of aid to provider of some of the most advanced defense tech in the world. We're already seeing Ukraine go from strength to strength in this department. Back in the spring, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the launch of the Drone Deal, which is a globe-spanning partnership between Ukraine and various nations in the Middle East, Europe, and even the Caucasus region. That deal is designed to help all involved build layered air defenses based on Ukraine's experience. The MOBIDIK could allow Ukraine to do something similar in the maritime defense sector. We imagine that many of the Middle Eastern countries that were affected by the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz earlier in 2026 would have loved to have MOBIDIKs sailing around to deal with Iranian fast boats and Shahed drones being launched at their territory. European nations dealing with Russia in the Baltic and Mediterranean regions will be licking their lips at the prospect of buying a cost-effective drone solution to serious naval problems. Ukraine knows this all too well. With the MOBIDIK, it doesn't just have the perfect addition to its already effective Black Sea and Crimean strategies. Ukraine has a weapons package that is perfect for ingratiating itself even deeper into the defensive structures of partners who are preparing for their own fights against Putin's Russia. Ukraine is sending something massive in occupied Crimea's direction now that it has the MOBIDIK. But the new maritime drone isn't the only thing that's coming for the peninsula. Russia is worried that Ukraine's own version of D-Day is just around the corner, and you can find out more by watching our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you keep getting your daily dose of videos from the Military Show. And thank you as always for watching.